Everyone, my name is Bob Foreman, and welcome to our first breakout session. I am the moderator and I have the great pleasure of introducing our first breakout speaker. His name is David Dasher, and David Dasher is the Chief Technology Officer and founder of CPL Online, the leading provider of e-learning and digital services to the UK's hospitality sector. That since 2018 has been part of CGA Group. And with over 25 years experience within the IT sector, he has worked extensively in the UK's corporate sector, developing database, marketing, and management solutions. And under David's leadership, CPL Online has established itself as a market leader and enjoyed several years of strong year-on-year growth. And personally, I've known David for longer than I want to admit because it's going to reveal our age, but I know that David had the pleasure of attending a lot of HPCC sessions with me, and it's just been a joy to watch him embrace the technology and leverage the technology in his own business. So with great pleasure and an honor and a privilege, I want to introduce to everyone Mr. David Dasher. Good morning, David, or good afternoon to you, David.
Good afternoon and good morning back to you. Hi, everybody. As Bob said, my name is David Dasher. I'm the CTO of CPL Learning now. And just to give you a bit of background, really, so I co-founded CPL Online, which is an e-learning company based in the UK, pretty much predominantly focused on hospitality. And we had a tremendous business with about 150 employees. Some of the major clients in the UK, hospitality clients. And back in 2018, we were acquired by a market insight company called CGA, and known as CJ Nielsen in the US. And we're now part of that family. So my role slightly changed, if you like, where I also look at, after I'll work for the parent company now with much more data. It's like a candy shop, which is fantastic. And so what we're going to do for you now is we're going to take you through some business cases. And so the idea here is pretty much everything I'm involved in with both businesses is based around HPCC, and which is obviously a fantastic product, but also we really want to talk about how we can use that in a real world environment, how we use it commercially, and how we use it as a game changer in working with such a volume of data, and some really complex systems that we want to be at the forefront, not just in the e-learning sector, but in the insight sector, specifically around hospitality. So I'm going to talk you through some of these. I'm going to also spin off into how we've done them, why we've done it a certain way, and how we really leverage HPCC. I'm also going to talk briefly about some of the ways the community and the company blogs have really shaped my thought process and the business's thought process in how we approach problems, how we try and create solutions, how we keep iterating those solutions, and really sort of get hold of the depth that you get with this product and you get with the help that you have. And Bob, who introduced me, I'll talk about some of his blogs. But also there's some there from Gavin Halliday, there's some from Flavio, which really have shaped how we approach things. So let's say, so enough about me. We're going to talk about 3 different business cases that we are concurrently working on. And the first one for the e-learning sector is smart learning. So we haven't come up with the finished title yet, but we're just calling smart learning for now. And the idea around this is typically when you do any sort of e-learning, depending on your role or your expertise, you get allocated a bunch of courses. Now, I've just showed a few sample ones here, and this might be sort of disability awareness, mental awareness, health and safety, manual handling, food safety, all these things that a large or small business will need you to understand, especially things like COVID training and things like that at the minute. And typically these courses are all allocated to an individual or a group or a job role. So all managers get certain types of courses, front of house bar staff. So the guy sending you serving you a beer in the bar get certain training. In the back of house, the kitchen guys get slightly different training, but they'll also have company training, which is about the ethos of the company and things. So there's a huge variety of training going on there. Excuse me. And typically what happens is, and I'm sure you, in one guise or another, you guys have seen these screens before, where you get allocated the courses, you pass the course or you fail the course, or generally you have to have a pass rate, and that might be, you have a pass rate of 70% in a lot of our courses, or 80%, and some clients have them at 100%. But typically it can be about 70 or 80% to pass that course, have that certificate, and show that you've passed that compliance, you passed that bit of training, you are knowledgeable. Now, what we've seen as we go through is, and just to whiz on here to some, we've done the course, but we've actually failed some questions. So I base this on excuse me, a real life learner who's actually passed all his certification and he's got a certificate, they're on the wall, they're all these things, but they're actually, they've failed a bunch of questions inside that course. And if you look at that in the aggregate, so if everyone's taken courses inside food safety and everyone fails on allergen awareness or things, that's not a great thing to have, where seemingly they've all passed the courses, but actually the same group of people or the same people have failed certain parts of the course, so nobody has got that bit of knowledge. So in this particular case, it's conflict management. They've failed about body language. There's also the legal requirements of conflict management, and this particular person's failed some things on time management, whether they be getting to a course or managing their own time or their own specific abilities in that. And what that actually gives us is, we came up with the idea of, well, what if we could actually target smaller micro bits of learning around those particular individuals? So what we've actually done is we took all of this data, and there's thousands and thousands of courses and bits of documentation, and it could work across multiple products. In our case, it's surveys and sales data and things like that. But what we've actually done is, using the Ngram system in the machine learning part of HPCC, we've actually created 4 billion engrams across all of our library of courses and content and everything else in between. And we've actually then said, okay, well, let's convert the questions and the topics that this person has really struggled with, and actually let's grab the engrams out of those particular bits of content. Now I have to point out here, so within those 4 or 5 billion engrams, there's a lot of noise in that. So typically what you'd actually do is remove all these stop words. So we've spent months and months literally removing so many stop words that are distracting, and of the parts of sentences and things. So they actually don't sort of create white noise around our product. So what we're actually left with is, okay, for this particular individual, they've got some keywords there. So it's conflict management, working together, time management, being effective in meetings, and these are all raw engrams. So obviously that's why that's there. But what we've then got is, conversely, positive engrams. So this is everything they have passed, they have learned, and we get a whole other set of engrams based on the questions and the content they've been looking at, whether they've been reading, watching videos, whether they've been doing courses or they've talked about their appraisals and things. So that's all in there as well. And what we actually do is we marry these things together. I won't go over all the details there, but we actually marry these things together. So we actually get, if we remove the engrams on a basic level chronologically, we're actually then left with, okay, if we take out everything you've got wrong, then everything you've learned subsequently, and start removing those things from one from the other, we're left with our remaining engrams, as we're just referring to them here. So what we're actually doing is, that gives us a bunch of engrams that we can actually work with. So what we actually do from that particular point is, we then send that into an engine or a repository and say, well, go and find me all the content and everything that we can actually work with that the user hasn't done already, that is maybe a different view of the same content, and then let's produce a list basically of all this extra micro content that, based on the words and engrams that that user's actually failed with or struggled with. So I should have pointed out before, it's not just failing questions, it's where somebody's really struggled, they've taken too much time, they've changed their mind lots of times. So we know they've struggled with that. So as well as their normal course content, what they're actually remembering, we're being recommended here is, okay, we've got conflict management, we've got understanding conflict management, because they've had more engrams based on that particular keyword or keywords, that seems a higher priority. Now, there's a couple of things that actually go on here. Firstly, while stripping, one document or one course could have thousands or hundreds of thousands of engrams. After we've taken out the stock words, we're left with just a real small-ish concentration of engrams that we can actually work with. And what we're actually doing is very simply, there's a few more levels to this, but we're actually then saying, well, okay, based on everything that we actually know, and based on the words we're looking for, what engrams are remaining and what's the highest percentage of match to that document. Now, we're quite lucky. We're not just a technology company. We have actually got an education team who also sit behind all of this, not only writing the content, but actually help us from a technical point of view. So what we actually have, common engrams here, which are all just sort of whizzed down the side. These are just, as the system goes, boilerplate, all these engrams are in that entire document. We then have what we call priority engrams. Now, this is where, looking at our documents, our education team have actually said these engrams are actually more important in this actual course than other keywords. So you might get conflict management as the system's automatically reading that, but actually our education team are going to double down and say, well, actually, this has actually got a lot about mental health awareness and things, so they can make a subject more important. So what happens is we ingest that into HPCC. So as well as having billions and billions of standard engrams from the normal ML engine, we actually have our education team add another layer in there and actually give it a lot more weight, which is why you're actually seeing two different things. So common engrams is one thing, but then we'd have the priority engrams, which would be added on top. One of the best things we can actually do, and this is going to link into some other projects that we're going to see in a minute, is these dynamic engrams. So these are engrams based on a general manager, or let's take a LexisNexis example, put my teeth back in. So let's say Bob has done a load of training for a load of people and everyone's really, really struggling with SKU or distribution. Then that could happen across all the courses that's happening. So Flavio, if you like, could actually see a pattern there and say, well, actually, hang on, everyone's really struggling with SKU. Let's do a blog and let's assign SKU as a keyword that would actually go to all of our people doing these courses. So if Bob might be the total genius of SKU, so because he has that knowledge already and a good presence of that data, he wouldn't get that content pushed to him. But other people who haven't done those little micro courses or have that knowledge based on SKU would actually get that as a higher priority item. So in this particular case, we're doing upselling, and we've said we also want to do time management, which is obviously on what we looked at before. But also, excuse me, as you will see a bit later when we're talking about sales data and things, the real key point, you'll see where it'll come full circle, is if a bar or restaurant is not selling as many cocktails or beers or spirits, well, actually, we can say, let's go and learn about upselling. Let's go and learn about spirits. Let's go and learn about premium beer. That's where the system really comes into its own, because what will actually happen is the order. So this is the exact same chart as we saw before, but conflict management is all down here. Now, actually, because we've said as a dynamic engram, that now is coming right to the top because it's actually been pushed through a dynamic engram, and the system will account for that and rearrange all the ordering. So again, what's really important is when you're looking at all of this data and all of the engrams and everything else, there is so many engrams to actually deal with, and so many sorts and so many people, because we've got 5-6 million courses that are actually being complete by 1 million people as of the last few months. So there's a huge amount of data in there, and to have the sheer power to process this, to organize it, to actually give you the results and give it to you in a fraction of a second is hugely important. And this wouldn't be possible without the power of HPCC. So please go and have a look at the Ngram if you're looking at relating documents together. There's a lot of other types of document linking that we're actually doing as well. But in this particular case, we're really, really interested in how we actually make the courses relatable to each other. Yes, I may have done a course on health and safety, but I really, when it comes to fire extinguishers, I'm absolutely terrible, and I'm the last person you want in the building when there's a fire. But the system will recognize that and actually start showing me and pushing towards me little bits of micro content, whether that was about fire extinguishers as a whole, or whether it is about foam fire extinguishers, which is a bit more specific. So that's where it gets really, really important for us. So that's a really cool part of the platform that we actually want to be able to use. Now, with there being billions and billions of engrams, what we actually do as part of the platform is we want to actually say, okay, and we're looking at, say, a person who owns the business or is managing thousands and thousands of people. What's the actual commonality in my business? So it might be about allergen awareness, which is obviously a huge thing. It might be about upselling because sales aren't as good as they should be. It might be about code understanding and things like that, and how to protect ourselves. So what we actually do is we have a whole library of again, approved keywords and engrams that we've actually got within the platform. So even there's a lot of white noise about new phrases and words that we have coming into the business, or there's other words that we actually don't want to be in there. So I can tell you on some of the more sexual harassment courses, there's obviously some words that come up in there that we actually don't want rising to the top. So we have to be a little bit careful there. So when we're actually reporting on these patterns, when it goes public, we obviously make sure these are part of the approved keywords. And again, joining billions of keywords to smaller data sets or to other larger data sets is absolutely key. And again, that's all done with this particular platform. So okay, so that's that one. I know we're through there, but there's an awful lot in there, and it's a really cool product, and it's going to save so much time, hundreds, thousands of hours per company, and actually going to really upskill and educate the people in there. But it could be used across any sector. The next product we're going to show you is based in the US. So this is a tool developed for our US business, which is CGA Nielsen, and this is all about taking transactional data from the till, so EPOS platforms, from registration systems, from all the providers, and it's all ingested into platforms. But obviously, what we're trying to do here is actually say, well, how does my business look against the market? What's the market actually doing? What's the market doing in Chicago as opposed to New York or Boston or something like that? So this particular platform is in terms of data, we've only just started this, and we're on about 1.6 billion transaction tickets and about 8 or 9 billion actual items within those tickets or within those covers. And what I'll show you now is how we're using HPCC to aggregate that, and also actually just literally how we can do this sub-second, display the information to as many users as we need to. So this is a little snapshot of the website that we're actually built. So this is RestauranTrak. The first instance is reasonably basic, but what we're actually doing is we're monitoring sales, we're monitoring check value, and we're also monitoring the number of checks or the number of covers. I keep having to flip between US and GB, so forgive me if I choose the wrong one. So in this particular term, what we're actually doing here is this data goes back about 4 years. It's aggregated by week, by day part. So a day part would be morning, afternoon, evening, late night, So you can obviously aggregate the data. We've got multiple segments, so you might have a restaurant, but within restaurant, then you've got sub categories or segments, which would be polished dining, casual dining, bars, and things like that. And then you've got other segments like nightclubs and things. Excuse me. But then we've got all the territories, and then so generally customers want to look at this as a total US. They also want to actually look at, say, almost statewide, call it a DMA. So it might be, say, Chicago DMA. And then we've actually got the city of Chicago, or whichever city it is there. And we pretty much have coverage across the entire US. And what we actually do with this is the data's ingested. We have a whole automated engine. So as we receive it from the tills, it gets processed. It gets classified by product level, which I'm going to come back to in the next example. And then what we actually have there is it gets ingested in that particular platform and then transferred over to HPCC. So we have a whole cluster dedicated to this platform. So we're ingesting this, say, every half an hour, every hour. The data is then we then sort of process with Thor. We process all that data, do all of our aggregations, and then we'll produce indexes and then actually export it through an API. So what we've actually got there is, if I just move on to the next slide. So these are just some views that we actually here have across the platform, because we showed the data over 12 weeks. But I wanted to just sort of give you a little feel for that as we go through, because you can see here from the start of February, this is sort of typical check value. And you can see here from the start of February, it's pretty much $30-$40. There's a dip there when we come here, and then obviously it stayed around that lower level. Now, what we're actually doing here, if I actually look at it slightly differently, this is actually based on the total check. So you can see on average in the total US in the restaurant sector, you've got 1,000 checks. It peaks up a bit, and look, when COVID kicks in, that really dies off and has stayed like that for a while. So obviously, the big impact in there is what we actually have when it actually comes to sales value. So companies doing $60,000, $80,000, $100,000 suddenly are back down to doing $5,000, $6,000, and it has a sort of major impact on obviously those businesses, a major impact on the economy and everything else, which obviously I don't need to go into. But it's using these platforms that enable us to analyze it at scale, to aggregate at scale, to look at businesses. So when we turn to classifiers, the data is not very clean when it comes in. So we have to classify, are you a restaurant? What type of restaurant are you? Get rid of a lot of that white noise. And what we actually then do, we actually spread this down into different sort of very different areas. So, and again, you can see sort of sales here. Just move on to another slide. So again, what we've actually done here, instead of being total US, I've done sort of Chicago, Illinois. And you can see they've actually got their actual sales value is typically around, gone from 40K pretty much up to 60, but that's actually getting better after the COVID, and it's actually starting to recover. You can see in that last week it's gone up 10%. Now, excuse me. What we allow the customers to do, and I'm going to come on to the technicality of this in a minute, is you can see here we have the actual market figure, and then we have the me figure. So I can see here the total sales for the market's been pretty steady, but my sales have dropped. The typical check value has remained steady for us, so it means the sales must have gone. If that plus that is that's gone down and that's steady, then the sales must have gone down. So you can actually see that obviously the number of checks and things. So it gives you that focus when you actually go into by product or by product category. So beer, wine, and spirits. It obviously makes that we can actually see which areas are actually struggling with, or which areas we have to do a lot more work on. Now, excuse me. So again, from here, we can actually see that this particular business is coming out of COVID and it's coming up. So these views actually give them a real good sense of how they're doing, where they're underperforming. So in terms of total sales, they're literally half the market here. Now, if you think about how we actually produce this, what we actually have is we have to have a set of data for the actual individual outlet or outlets based on all of those different aggregates. But therefore, we also have to have the market figure that actually goes with it. So to actually do that is an actual huge amount of work, because what we're again doing is trying to aggregate the information by location, the sales check value, the restaurant type, and everything else. So when our technical guys hit these websites and hit our API, which in turn hits HPCC, they can say, this is me, this is my ident, this is where I am, go and get me all that sales, go and get me all that check data that I can actually then just display out on a graph. And again, because we're talking hundreds of thousands of rows of results, the speed of HPC to be able to deliver this to could be 100, could be 10,000 people simultaneously is absolutely superb. And one of the key bits in this is how we do this at scale, how we do this efficiently, how we refresh the data as quickly as we can refresh it. And this is where I really want to touch on. I've just got obviously a picture of a graph here, but this is where the training and the expertise at LexisNexis and HPCC really kicks in. So I'm really proud of this screen, like I said, because my distribution here is pretty much as balanced as I can make it. I would like to say, like Thanos, all things balanced. But we've got, we're reading 1.4 billion tickets here after it's filtered, just doing joins, and the balance is right, the skew is right, the distribution's right. Now, when I was originally doing this, I was taking about 3 or 4 hours to actually just process these large aggregates. Now, actually, when I'd read some a couple of documents. So firstly, you've got Bob Foreman's blog on distribution and skew, which is absolutely superb, and an empirical point of, if you don't know it, you don't think that. The problem with HPCC is because it works, you think it's great and everything's right with the world and you can produce a production system. The reality is you can do it 100 times faster if you have that understanding, and if you delve into the blogs and delve into the areas so that you can actually learn a bit more. So things like, so when I finally sorted out the distribution of all this data down to this level, actually what went from 4 hours went down to 20 minutes. Which is absolutely phenomenal. It's such an improvement. I was thrilled with 4 hours, but actually then to bring it down to this level is absolutely superb. We were automatically going to look at, well, should we throw more boxes, more CPU, more hardware? And again, having read a blog by Flavio on, it's not necessarily about your hardware, it's actually about your it could be about your code and how you have them distributed. That really linked up the two blogs together for me. So I can't emphasize enough that reading the information, the actual speed to process to get these things actually out into a production environment, it's so important you try and get that right. And these blogs, and one from Gavin Halliday on joins. And again, are we using a lookup join? Are we using a local join? Are we going to, however we're going to distribute this data, the join type matters and everything else. But reading that information just totally transformed the way I thought about data and allowed us to produce something so much bigger that would actually is for us unparalleled in terms of speed. Just to give you a little feel here, these are some of the just basically some of the index outputs. And I talked before about, well, actually we have it, their outlet ID is called CGA ident, and this is basically the data by outlet, by day, by a date key, the same by a week key. And you can see obviously there's 6.5 million rows in there, there's 1 million in there. And again, the whole point of this is in our query, we have basically a decision tree that says, okay, I'm looking for this outlet by week, go and use this index, bring it back, and it's super fast. And the same for the market, whether we're looking at, say, down here, this is so the market with hierarchy level 1, which is total US by segment, and there's only 2,000 rows in there. If I do the level 1 by the week, there's only 318. So you can imagine this is absolutely super fast in bringing the data back because of that decision tree, because of creating the right indexes in the right place. And we can also go down to date time within an hour, within things like that. So having that the right index layout and having the ability to choose all these different indexes and then have that decision tree in the platform is just absolutely phenomenal. So just a few key points there. So all the data that we actually see, which is another reason for HPCC, it's all based on median calculations. So in the UK, we actually have just a mean average of everything, but it's all median in the US. And when you start looking at 8.9 billion items by each aggregate, is just a phenomenal amount of work to do. But this platform just makes it actually sail through, get your distribution right, get it all working locally on each node, and actually your speed's right there. You can afford to do these things. As I said before, we're running in the website. You can do it by day, by week, by segment, by day part, and all this with a 300 millisecond query response time, no matter which query we're looking at. We can do it for 2 years, 4 years, it doesn't matter. Previously, they were doing an old system where they were doing it in SQL, but they'd only ever keep the latest week or 12 weeks. We can keep 4 years worth. Absolutely superb. Just moving on now to a UK-based product, so EPOS Flash, which is a daily reporting engine for the recovery of the UK market. So, and the trick with this is it's got to be within 3 days of the actual transaction. So the company and the till providers have to supply all this data within that timescale. We have to process it, we have to classify it, we have to ingest it, build it, deploy it, ready to go. Not just in website, but I'm going to show you now in terms of some Power BI reporting. So what you have here, this is a little snapshot of, and I've chosen, so this is all powered by HPCC. So we have an API that sits in the middle, which is a .NET Core API. It's all cloud-based, so it's all in Microsoft Azure. The Roxys are all there, and we have some on-prem. But in this particular case, the data comes in, again, it's raw till data. This CGA have some absolutely magical data systems that allow us to classify. As you can imagine, each different pub company spells things differently. Most people can't spell Heineken. So there's so many different spellings of it. So, and different thousands of different SKUs of all these different products, and they're changing all the time. So when you come to some high level reporting like this, they have to go up a tree. So from the actual product, they actually get aggregated up to, well, we know that's a soft drink, or we know it's a packaged soft drink, or we know it's a draft beer, or we know it's actually a packaged beer or premium beer. So this is just the top level, but actually the work underneath it, there's a huge amount of work goes underneath. And probably too soon to show now, but maybe next time, is we've got this absolutely incredible machine learning engine that's been used to classify data, and the guys who've written that are just some of the cleverest people I know. It's just absolutely superb, and we'll be ingesting hundreds of millions of rows of data, running it through this machine learning classifier that will automatically do classify it as a category and everything else, and save us a huge amount of time, but more importantly allow us to do things even faster. But in this particular case, so just to explain what's going on here, they can actually choose, I want to look at drinks, alcohol, our favorite beer, non-alcoholic, I don't even know why that's in there, soft drinks and spirits and things. But they can also be categorized in this particular report, bars and clubs, pubs and restaurants. And then we can also look at it by value and volume. Now this particular report is for drink suppliers. So the people who make the beers or make the spirits and wines. So they have a slightly different view on it. So the reason I've chosen soft drinks is because soft drinks was part of a government scheme to help people get back into hospitality after the reopening, which happened on the 4th of July, significant date for you guys, I'm sure. But what this actually tells us, so we start down the bottom, we know on the 4th of July, only 50% of outlets are actually opened that were opened on the same date the previous year. Went down slightly on the Sunday, and then slowly on the Monday started to come back up to 60%. However, what you can also see on that first day, we were 50% down in terms of sales based on the previous year, the same day the previous year. And obviously that gets verified in that graph. And we can do this by week, but day is the important bit here. Now, during August in the UK, the government created this Eat Out to Help Out scheme, where what they actually did is provided vouchers for people in the UK to go and eat out on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, which are typically slow days. I'm probably not doing this a good service because the analysts at CGA are just superb at this. So bear with me. But what we can actually see is that, again, 83% open, rising to 86. But you can actually see in terms of soft drinks in all the outlets, actually were higher than the previous year. So you can actually see, and then look at that whopping 98%. And this is what the drink suppliers need to know, because they don't always know what's going on in the once it leaves them, it gets distributed through distributors, strangely enough, and they actually don't get to see everything that's going on. So it's good for them to see where it's not just sitting in storage; it's actually being sold. What we can also see there is we look at beer. So when the market back opened, there was 16% higher, so everyone was dashed out to get that first beer, but then it obviously tailed off there again, so which actually wasn't great, but slightly higher the amount of outlets that were actually coming back making beer. And again, when it actually came to the Eat Out to Help Out, there was a less of an impact because those vouchers weren't to do with beer. It was only on soft drinks and food. So soft drinks and food went through the roof, but actually everything else didn't. Sorry, I'm zoomed out here. I don't know how to. No. Sorry. So what we also have is another view of the data where, and this again is beauty of HPCC, we're not just looking at 14 days like we were before. We're actually in the same view of data. We can actually look at the last 12 months. Now, this one's by week, but to have all of this has all got to come back sub-second. And again, that's the key importance, whether we're looking at value or volume. I've blanked out the competitors because some clever people will be able to derive who I'm talking about. So I've got rid of that. But again, we've got all these categories. Have you noticed, say, on the graph in here, this is really important because the graphs are all done by week, so you can actually see that nuance of what's going on. But actually, what we can actually do is we can actually see it by a different method. So we can look at it and choose to aggregate the data as an average over the previous 4 weeks. So you start to see a smoother transition. So if the client actually wants to see, well, actually, how's this? I want to see a steadier version, not just a frantic weekly version of the same data, or they can see it by quarter. So you can see that as a quarterly figure, and you can obviously see that actually took a complete nosedive when COVID hit in, and then you can see the market starting to recover. But obviously we can see that there with those colours. So restaurants are struggling. They were always behind, but they're really struggling there. And I can see me against my market. So these tools, if you like. So again, as well as an MAT, moving annual target, is for every single day here, we actually look back on average at the last 12, the last year by day. So for that particular date point, every single date point is the previous 12 months before it. So it's a huge amount of data to calculate. It's a huge amount of data to actually display and give back to the users in time. So there's a huge amount that has to go on there. For every single day, I'm just conscious of time, for every single day we have all of these different, this is only a fraction of the aggregate, so we can do it by spirits, by cola, by draft cask ale, by cider, you name it. This is totally dynamic. We just get fed the data. It gets aggregated by day and all the other different aggregates. We can even go down to product level. You can imagine doing every single day by segment, by category, by product. There's so much data. We have to be smart. We have to pre-calculate as much as we can. We store in super files as much as we can, but still there's a huge amount. We can see here, we actually, for each row of data, we have the day, the week, 4 weeks, quarter, MAT, and a lot of suppliers now are looking, are really interested in everything since the 4th of July. There's some figures here that are 0. That's another huge part of the platform, because for us to show this data, they have to meet a set of rules, that there must be a certain amount of suppliers, certain amount of clients, certain amount of volume, and it can't exceed a certain percent. Otherwise, we have to show it as 0. So all of those things have to happen in HPCC as well, which is a huge amount of process, but just wouldn't be possible without all that information. We're also showing performance based on the same day of the previous, or the same week, the same day of the last year, or the last 4 weeks of the same period last year. And again, we're showing whether you're down 30% or you're down 20%, it's huge. Now, again, these are all based on what we call rate of sales. So it's the value divided by the number of outlets, giving them more of a median average. We're talking about 5 billion rows of data that we're doing, but we also have to aggregate it by product, by day, by outlet, day, week, segment, category, territory. There's a lot more in there, but we're still sub-second query response time with HPCC. I know I'm going slightly over, Bob. I will be with you now. And then just to show how we're actually doing this, we're doing this in M code. So we give the guys, the analyst teams, the option that if they want to do it in Power BI or Excel, great. Connect that to an API, and they just specify the ROCSI parameters, whether they be global or they just be Booleans or whatever it is. Just hits the service, gets the data back, and away they go. And they just connect to our service. The teams can do custom stuff in Excel or custom stuff in Power BI, and of course, Power Websites. I was going to talk a little bit about the API, but I'm going to skip over that because we're running out of time. But again, just done with the .NET Core API, connects to HPCC, ROCSI, and just is absolutely fabulous. So that's all cloud-based. And we're just setting up all our parameters, just like we would in HPCC. Pass it through, get the data back, and away we go. And it's absolutely superb. And then just on a final note, and again, .NET Core, but just on a final note, I talked about before, please go and have a look at these blogs. So you've got joins, ECL tip distribute, and troubleshooting. So Gavin Halliday did one on joins, which is I pretty much read every week. The same with Bob's distribute, just to make sure you're really hitting all the tips and hints that you can actually see. And before you go splashing money out on kit, by all means, please go and read this from Flavio, which is absolutely superb. And I know I talk very quickly, but if you do want to speak to me, I'm on Twitter, or here's my direct email address, and be more than happy to speak. Thank you very much. Or have been certainly in August, it was purely about soft drinks. So soft drinks went through the roof. So suppliers will be looking to get more soft drinks in there. And if spirits or cocktails aren't selling, they can actually then choose to promote them more or replace them with something else. So it's all about, they think a lot about what range you're going to have in the bars and areas. So what's great last month is not necessarily great towards this Christmas or whatever. So there's a huge amount of product level reporting, which I can't show you on here. And that's how they do their business, and it's superb. But yeah, absolutely, the trends dictate what products and what services are going to be held in each restaurant, and you can actually tie them together. if a company isn't selling as many cocktails as it should be, if you think back to the original slide of training, well, actually that can be a dynamic engram that can go into the smart learning, and then a bunch of bartenders can get actually trained on upselling cocktails, and then we can monitor the training after the sales afterwards. So absolutely. And hello, Becky.
All right, David, I think we have time just one more. What do you see in the future right now with everything going on? You've been in the middle of the tempest. What's your predictions over the next couple of months with the trends in hospitality?
Wow, well, I'm probably not the person to answer that, but I would say there's even more, I think, with these new curfews that are coming in the UK, certainly. So they have to close at 10 o'clock. We're finding people are opening up earlier, the tastes are changing, and I think it's a real struggle. One is, you're talking at least 50% of your normal turnover is gone. The amount of people you can sit in a restaurant is gone. The amount of training you have to give to people to not only have great service and great quality, but also now cope with all of these new rules and how we actually operate in this environment. And hospitality is one of the safest environments you can actually go to. There's an awful lot there. I think that the training will get stricter. There'll be more of it. I think the trends are going to change a huge amount. Not just how we eat, the amount of time we have to eat. It's a whole different experience. And I would say the true answer is one of the analysts at CJ will probably answer that better, but I think it's just changing every 5 minutes, and how you keep up with it is all data dependent.
I think we can say this globally, everybody. Mask up, keep your mask up, and let's all get well, and let's turn the corner on this. David, thank you so much. I think we're out of time, and we have the next session on Kubernetes coming in as we're on our cloud track. David, it's great to see you again, and be well, and we'll talk again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.